Good day everyone and welcome to this tutorial. In this chapter, we will uncover the process of creating a UV map template for the ongoing vehicle project that can be sent later to the 2D artist to create paint jobs, liveries, or skins for the vehicle body. However, since we would add dirt map for the vehicle exterior parts, we will include other parts during this process. Although those parts will have different materials which are not going to be on the final template. This will ease the process of unwrapping these parts with the vehicle body parts over environmental maps such as dirt map. The current scene is one of the previous projects that I have worked on. The viewport during designing and texturing is meant for monitoring the progress we made. Thus, I intend to keep the viewport settings optimized for performance over quality. Because of that, you may find the scene textures a little bit fuzzy or pixelated. However, you can increase the texture map size from the viewport configuration to match the scene maps. I do recommend to keep the texture maps at low resolution, such as 512 or 1024 pixel. Meanwhile, the renderer will use the maximum resolution of the scene maps during the rendering. So, by rendering the scene, we can monitor textures or maps and keep the viewport configuration optimized for performance. I have used this map as UV checker. Nothing special about this map, except the unified width of the green stripes and some text to monitor UV's direction. The map resolution is 2048 pixel. From the UV editor, I generated this template with the same resolution, which can be used later for 2D arts. In this tutorial, we will use this pattern as UV checker. This pattern resolution is 1024 pixel. I would like to decrease the square's dimension and increase the map resolution to 2048 pixel. Let's do this inside Photoshop. First, I am going to decrease the image size by half to reduce the square's size. Then define the image as new pattern. Open a new image file with 2048 resolution. Switch to the stamp tool, then select the added pattern and start drawing. Pick sharp brush. Enlarge the brush size to minimize the effort. Save the high-resolution image inside the project folder. Inside 3ds Max, we will use this pattern to check the UV's face's direction. By the end of this chapter, you should have all the required action steps to start your own project. This is going to be the closure for the UV map and texturing sequences. There are some parts that will be exposed to environmental effects, such as dirt. I have already isolated those parts for each level of detail. we will unwrap these parts, and even their scale, for all the levels of detail. Although some of these parts will have different materials, and will not be on the final UV template, it's important to unwrap these parts together with the vehicle body parts. Later, that will ease the alignment of the UVs on the dirt map. Use the selection tool to select all the isolated parts from the level of detail layers inside the viewport. I have created UV checker material. Let's assign it to the selection. The next expected step is to add Unwrap UVW modifier to the selection. However, this will complicate the selection of UV's chunks inside the viewport and the UV editor. In order to ease the unwrapping process, we will work separately on each level of detail. Then we will perform the final adjustment on the combined level of detail layers. From the viewport, select all the isolated objects of L0 layer, except for the license plate and the exhausts. The plate is already unwrapped, and I intend to keep the original UV map of the exhausts as they are, still maintaining their primitive cylindrical shape. When trying to render the scene, even with a material assigned to the 3D objects, we got an error. The error call for missing map coordinates with a list of numerous parts. This is commonly happen when some objects are imported into 3ds Max without texture coordinates, or when the UV map is removed from 3D objects. None of these scenarios did occur. However, after adding Unwrap UVW modifier to the selection, we could render the scene without any error. Open the UV editor. What you see now is the original UV map that was created automatically by 3ds Max during the designing stage. We need to unwrap these original UVs to be compatible for video games. Let's select the left and right side. Disable Ignore Back Faces to speed the selection process. During the early development of this project, we have mentioned some rules in designing vehicles for video games. One of them is the UV map separation lines. Around those, our designing strategy was revolved. Those lines will be our guidance during the process of unwrapping and separating UV segments. For each level of detail, we have kept those lines' position unaltered. There are a lot of choices when it comes to the bottom side UVs of the vehicle. For instance, we can project the bottom UVs with the front and the back sides. As the bottom side is not actually an area of interest. However, after refining the selection, I decided to unwrap these bottom segments with their corresponding side. To select UVs by elements, activate Select by Element from the modifier settings. This option will speed up the selection process. For refinement of selection, you may need to disable this option. You can disable the texture visibility inside the viewport if needed. From the material editor, disable Show shaded material in viewport. Select by element in the modifier settings. Work for UV selection inside the viewport. There is another select by element option in the UV editor that work inside the editor. We will use both of the viewport and the UV editor to select UV segments. Project the side selection on the x-axis over planar projection. Before we advance in the unwrapping process, it's important to mention that the current projected UVs were normalized to the map dimensions. Our main objective from this initial work is to separate the UV map based upon the vehicle side's perspective. We could continue the process of UV separation with this normalized projection. However, we will not need normalize projection in this chapter, as it will be very difficult to even the scale of any normalized UVs. Turn off Normalize Map from the modifier settings. In order to move the selected UVs inside the editor with precision, from the Transform toolbar, activate Relative Mode. Type -4 in the U field to move the selection horizontally towards the west by 4 steps from the checker box. Each step is equal to the current map resolution. Type -2 in the V field to move the selection vertically towards the south by 2 steps from the checker box. Each step is equal to the current map resolution. Selecting UV segments can be deceiving. Thus, it is important to inspect the selection inside the editor for missing UVs, as this is commonly happen during the process. At the end of the day, there will be no single UV left behind. Let's select the UV segments that will represent the vehicle top. I included the spoilers into the selection. Later, we will refine their UVs. Project the top selection on the z-axis over planar projection. Release the planar projection. Rotate the top section 90 degree counterclockwise. select the new projected UVs, press Ctrl and I to invert the selection. We will temporarily project both the front and the back sides together. Later, we will distinguish them. Project the front and the back selection on the y-axis over planar projection. Deselect the back side from the viewport. Remember to deactivate Ignore back faces from the modifier settings. The UV segments of the front side, including the side mirrors, need to be flipped or mirrored horizontally. Most of overlapping UVs are not acceptable in the unwrapping process. However, for certain parts that would not be on the UV map template, overlapping UVs are acceptable. Our initial work is complete. Collapse the Unwrap UVW modifier. In this section, we will solve the overlapping UVs between the spoilers and the trunk. Also, we will achieve some basic progress in unwrapping one of the spoiler's UVs. Apparently, the geometry of the spoiler has left and right sides that can be projected on the x-axis. And if we do so, that would solve the texture deformation on these areas. Adding Unwrap UVW modifier to the sub-object level will show only the UVs of selected polygons inside the editor. And if nothing is selected, the editor will be empty. The unwrapping process is one of the most advanced and yet sensitive process, especially when performed on multiple 3D objects. Working with Unwrap UVW modifier, you should be fully aware of the modifier behavior. That will save you a lot of time and effort. Add Edit Poly modifier to the sub-object level. Collapse the Edit Poly modifier. The 3D object is now on the object level. This technique also works on multiple selection. Apply this technique before adding Unwrap UVW modifier to multiple selection, in order to avoid unintended sub-object selection. The spoiler has also front and back sides that can be projected on the y-axis. Bottom side as well, that is currently occupying the same area of the top UVs. However, due to the UV map template, limited space, and for the sake of efficiency, we have to be selective about the surfaces that we would like to represent on the UV map template. The selection process might be quite tedious, especially for the high level of detail, since we have chamfered edges instead of detaching the geometry into elements. Rather than going through tedious process of selection, I will use box unwrapping to set the spoiler UVs apart. If we use box projection, the result might not meet expectations. Inside the UV editor, go to Mapping menu. select Normal Mapping. From the Normal Mapping dialog, select Box Mapping. Disable Rotate Clusters, then hit OK. It's now a straightforward process of unwrapping. Since most of UV map template require no overlapped UVs, we will refine the new UVs clusters based upon areas of interest. full unwrapping process for the spoiler sides might be required. However, due to the limited space of the map, we have to be selective in our choices. Our work for this part is now complete. Collapse the Unwrap UVW modifier. I will repeat the same process for the other spoiler off camera. The base frame of the spoiler will not be on the final UV template. I am going to detach it to a new object. However, we still need to include it inside the unwrapping process. Later, we might give it different material. We have successfully completed the initial process of unwrapping the first level of detail. Now, the vehicle has distinguished UV segments that represent its sides over the map. In order to save your precious time, I have completed the initial process of unwrapping for the other levels off camera. Next, we will perform advanced unwrapping on the combined levels. Turn on the visibility for all the levels layers. Inside the viewport, use the selection tool and select all the 3D objects. I will not include the exhausts in this process. Add Unwrap UVW modifier to the selection. After pressing Open UV Editor, some lagging did occur. I have removed most of it during the editing of this video. It was expected, since I did ask too much from my machine. Eventually, 3ds Max will manage to open the UV editor after a period. What's appear inside the editor is UV map layers of all levels of detail, overlapping each other. It's time to manually arrange proper packing for all these UVs clusters inside the map borders. But first, we need to project each group of UVs to unify their own scale and position. Freezing UV segments will prevent their selection. We have some UVs that were unwrapped incorrectly. These UVs belongs to the top side. For a successful unwrapping process, no UVs should be left behind or have wrong perspective projection. Otherwise, serious texturing faults might occur, especially when those UVs are on the first level of detail. I included the sides of the spoilers within the projection of the left and the right sides of the vehicle. And the new projection has some overlapping UVs that we will solve later. Other sides of the spoilers will be included within their perspective projection. This is the combined projection for the top sides. As you might notice, we have some overlapping UVs between the spoilers and the trunk levels that demand correction. Finally, this is the combined projection for the back and the front levels. The combined front projection is required to be flipped or mirrored horizontally. It's time for proper packing. These clusters have unified scale. However, we need to scale down these clusters to bring them down to the actual map resolution. During this process, Unified Scale tool must be used in all time. Otherwise, the unified scale factor will be gone for good. I will set the selection pivot to the left bottom corner of the map. Zoom in the map to achieve better controlling of the scale tool. Sometimes, the Select tool does not work as intended. If Select by Element is enabled, for UV map optimization, I am going to transfer these spoilers clusters over the front side. For precise alignment, activate Snap to Vertices. Snap one of the selection center vertices to one of the target. Constrain the Scale tool inside the editor to vertical direction. Then move the selection upward. There are some overlapping UV's clusters that require resolving. We will address that later in the final refinement process. Our main objective is to roughly arrange all UV's clusters inside the map borders. We will perform the final refinement in the next section. we will start by fixing some overlapped UVs in between the vehicle body parts. Those parts will have the same material and will be on the UV map template. Select the top spoiler of all levels. Both spoilers of all levels have overlapped UVs and between the trunk. Add Unwrap UVW modifier to the selection. Select the top, the left, and the right UVs clusters. Constrain the Move tool to horizontal direction. Move the selection to the right, outside the map borders. Select the front and the back sides. Constrain the Move tool to vertical direction. Move the selection to the top, outside the map borders. Deselect all, then collapse the modifier. I will repeat the same process for the other spoiler. No need to change the front and the back clusters location for now. Next, we will optimize the UV map. Inside the viewport, use the Selection tool to select all the scene objects, except for the exhausts. Add Unwrap UVW modifier to the selection. Any clusters of UVs outside the map borders will not be rendered inside the UV template. However, those clusters, if kept, will have wrong texture. Due to the UV map characteristic, pattern-like behavior of repeating itself outside the map borders. Another rule to bear in mind while unwrapping. The best optimization of the 2D space is to utilize the empty areas of the map to the limit. In order to move UV's clusters with precision over the map, from the Transform toolbar, activate Relative Mode. Use the Coordinates controller keys to move the selection. For instance, each press on the V bottom key will move the selection downward by 0.01 step. Each step is equal to the current map resolution. Period the press for better controlling. The highlighted UVs belong to the spoilers. We will decide later to assign different material to them or not. Anyway, they will not be included in the UV map template. The checker map has served its main purpose completely. However, the final refinement is not yet done. For that, we will use this map. What's special about it is that all the green stripes have equal width. The gap in between each pair of stripes is precisely double the stripe width. The dashed lines are precisely in the center of each pair. This is a unified scale map that will serve the advanced refinement purposes. Obviously, we have texture misalignment. Since the current map was not designed to match the current UV map of the 3D objects. The final refinement will end when we align the top, the left, and the right sides of the UV map. Afterwards, one can generate UV map template without any blame. There is no enough space to move the top clusters. On the contrary, there is room to move the left and the right clusters. It's a good idea to increase the map resolution from the viewport configuration to the actual resolution of the current map. The final refinement process is now complete. For efficiency, some studios prefer unified scale for their vehicle's UV map, so that the game engine can switch livery between different models. Others specialize certain liveries to certain models. Personally, I do prefer to use both general and special. For that, I will align the UV map to match the scale of the current map. Precision is what we are seeking, and that require patience and time. The advanced refinement of the UV map demand precision. A better reading of the UV map will lead to better understanding and efficient editing that will save time and effort. The advanced refinement of the UV map is now complete. Deselect all, then collapse the modifier. it's time to generate the UV template. For this process, we will need the body parts of the first level of detail. Exclude from selection any part that will not be included in the UV template. Add Unwrap UVW modifier to the selection. The current highlighted UVs will be presented on the template. In order to generate UV template, from the Tools menu, select Render UVW template. The recommended resolution for the vehicle template is 2048 pixel. Press Render UV template. Save the generated template in PNG format inside the project folder. You might notice the large scale of the plate in comparing to the back of the vehicle. The larger the scale of UVs, the more resolution it will capture. For the best utilization of the 2D space, the plate has a large scale. Of course, for dynamic license plate, we will use different materials. And this area will be empty. There are some overlapped UVs in this template, mostly intended. You can inspect that by following the green lines over the template. We can easily figure this template. However, when this template is sent to 2D artist or other users, they may not figure it. Perhaps some annotation over the template or a copy might become great help. Finally, I hope that some concepts of creating vehicle UV map template are being delivered successfully in this chapter.